Fujifilm's GFX system has brought a uniquely big picture approach to the photography world in recent years, and today we're getting a chance to look at their latest entry in the lineup. This is the GFX100 II. Yes, it is indeed called the second, and we're talking 102 megapixels of beautiful imagery on display here. But the real power of this second iteration comes down to its usability, processing, video features, and robust camera-to-cloud functionality that could make it a go-to camera for fast turnaround shoots. We took the camera with us on a hike recently along with the new and finally released GF55mm f1.7 lens, and we put some of its latest features to the test. Also later on, we're going to take a look at the other two lenses here, the GF30mm f5.6 tilt-shift lens and GF110mm f5.6 tilt-shift macro lens. So let's start with the obvious here. 102 megapixels on a medium format sensor, that's about 20% bigger than full frame. This matches the resolution of the previous GFX100, but we're seeing a whole new sensor design here paired with the X Processor 5, which is Fujifilm's most recent processor first seen in the X-T5. Now, for those wondering, this is indeed a Bayer sensor design, but the new design promises a 30% improvement in dynamic range over both the GFX100 and 100S. The processor is really doing a lot here, which you'll see throughout the video, but as far as photography is concerned, it's pushing a ton of data, even faster than before, with a continuous 8 FPS mechanical shutter, a new AI-assisted autofocus algorithm, a superb 8 stops of in-body image stabilization, and a huge focus on video features, which we'll cover in a bit. We tested out the second GFX100 along with the brand new GF55mm, and wow, this is just a beautiful combo. The large field of view that you get from the sensor, plus the ultra-fast aperture of the lens, gives us some breathtaking bokeh. Colors are a strong suit of Fujifilm cameras in general, thanks in large part to their film simulations, but we really pushed the dynamic range of the new sensor with the mottled sunlight that peeked into every shot of the forest. You can see how, in these close-up portraits, there is incredibly subtle shadow detail, even with somewhat contrasty film looks, while the highlights of delicate areas such as skin are accurately captured. Close-up detail is of course in no short supply here, as one would expect with 102 megapixels of resolution, but combined with the precise autofocus and the new 55mm lens, it's easy to forget just how good some of these images can get. Check out the rust, paint, and foliage details on this car as you zoom into the image. Speaking of autofocus, there are multiple improvements with AF here, letting you lock onto and track even difficult subjects. The internal subject detection includes both face and eye modes, but can also use specific AI-assisted modes to detect animals and birds. Focusing is precise enough to lock onto small, low-contrast regions. Okay, so let's talk about video then. There's a lot to cover here. Having such a big sensor means the new GFX100 can produce some of the widest, most cinematic images possible on a body of this size. Fujifilm really puts the sensor to work here, not just in how wide it can get, but in how many aspect ratios and frame types it lets you work with. The largest frame size, the native GF format, can be recorded all the way up to 4K 60p with no cropping, or even up to 8K 30p with a 1.44 times crop. If you want to work in other formats, either to match a camera or to use lenses with smaller coverage, you can choose from Premista, otherwise known as VistaVision, standard full-frame 35mm or anamorphic 35mm, and this is before you get to aspect ratios, which range from your typical 16:9 capture to DCI 17:9 ratios, and there's even a 5.8K 2.35:1 mode. As you can imagine, video quality is incredibly sharp and detailed. We shot almost everything in 17:9 with a mixture of 4K 60 and 8K 24 frame rates, but I haven't even gotten to the best part yet. The camera can shoot ProRes internally, up to 4K, giving you even more flexibility in recording options and in post-production. To save ourselves on space, we shot very little in ProRes, opting instead for HEVC, but it's impressive to have ProRes here nonetheless. The bitrate and codec options on the camera are varied and flexible, giving you finer control over data rates than I'm used to seeing on cameras like this. Besides the ProRes HQ, 422, and LT flavors, which are special in their own regard, you have a multitude of H.264 and HEVC options. On the low end, you have H.264 long-op 420 8-bit in either MOV or MP4 containers. Now for even better quality, especially for color depth, you can go to the high-end HEVC options, which top out in both intra and long-op 422 MOV modes. For 4K, both of these reach 720 megabits per second, which should be more than enough for most purposes, and it's the mode we stuck with for the majority of our time with the camera. So how do the improvements to the second GFX100 bear out when shooting video? AF and stabilization held up well here. For these two shots, I went entirely handheld, no gimbal or additional gear, but considering I was crab walking in the rain, it maintains a pretty solid lock on our subject. Other shots are handheld and at 60 FPS, which should give you a good idea of how little the focus drifts even in fast-moving action. The quick menus on the new GFX100 are similar to before, so if you're coming off the first model, you'll recognize a lot of what's going on here, but there are many more options crammed into both the photo and video modes that are worth checking out. Now, on the photo side of things, you can easily access every setting that basically pertains to the camera's image processing. Aside from the ISO, white balance, and dynamic range options, you even have options like high ISO noise reduction and on-the-fly aspect ratio and resolution options. The trademark film simulations are, of course, all easily accessible as well, along with fine-tuning for highlights, shadows, color, and sharpness. Most of the autofocus options can be selected from here too. But if you dig into the main menus just a little bit more, you'll see just how deep this really goes. Every option is labeled clearly and explains what it does. RAW recording, for example, lets you choose between uncompressed, compressed, and losslessly compressed options, along with the bit depth. The film simulations are, as always, presented with descriptions of their intended look, and the newest entry here is the Reala Ace simulation. Over on the video end, the quick menu is similar to the photo side. You'll notice shutter speed is not available as shutter angle, but it is easy enough to access. Most intuitive though is the video format option, which can dynamically adjust the sensor size right in front of you. This is apart from the aspect ratio, which, as I said before, you can also adjust in the quick menu, along with frame rate and even bit rate and the new waveform monitor. If you're curious about the actual movie dimensions, however, you'll want to go into the full menu to see what each aspect ratio provides for a given sensor size. From here, the media recording setting page can take care of the majority of your recording setup. Your codec and bitrate options are vast, as I mentioned before, and you have several card recording options as well. Lastly, you have color profiles, and we decided to shoot F-Log2 for the entirety of this video. By the way, we didn't get to test it here, but you probably noticed separate options here for HDMI output. That's because this camera can also output 12-bit 422 video all the way up to 8K for external recording in either ProRes RAW or Blackmagic RAW to get the absolute most quality out of the image. So after our little trip, we learned that Fujifilm is launching two other GFX lenses that you see here, the GF 30mm f5.6 tilt-shift lens and the GF 110mm f5.6 tilt-shift macro lens. It goes without saying that these are two very unique options to have on the GFX system. 30mm produces very wide scenic views, but tilt-shift capabilities can turn a cityscape into a miniature dreamscape. You can also get some really cool shots here and have the ability to isolate fragments of an otherwise wider composition, even simulating a much shallower look for portraits. The 110mm looks wider than you might expect since this is a GF sensor after all, but it still has the compression of a longer lens, and adding tilt shift to the mix can produce some striking images. Take a look at this street view and you'll see that you can still capture from sidewalk to sidewalk, all while producing that trademark look you'd expect from a tilt shift lens. But this lens is also a macro lens. If you walk outside New York City right now, you're bound to run into some of these guys. Needless to say, the macro capabilities and resolution of the GFX100 can capture some wild close-up details. But on that note, let's get back to the camera. The second iteration of the GFX100 resembles the GFX100S more than it does the original GFX100 in most ways, but there are some key physical differences between all three. Probably the most obvious one is the shorter body, which loses the built-in vertical grip of the original and opts for an overall design much closer to the 100S. The second key change is the switch from dual SDXC card slots to a combination CF Express Type B and SDXC arrangement. This was undoubtedly done due to the much faster speeds of CF Express needed for 8K acquisition and the faster still burst rates. If you look at the backside, the button arrangement and the LCD screen are pretty much identical to the 100S, meaning you get the slightly more condensed button arrangement here as opposed to that of the original GFX100. Though personally, I find this is much easier to handhold. The real change here is in the EVF, which now sports 9.44 million dots at a 120 FPS live view. This is a significant upgrade from the 100S, which topped out at only 3.69 million dots. The top of the camera gives you a gorgeous OLED display that shows you much more information about your image than the previous model's displays did, especially in video mode. And it details just about everything from exposure information to color profile, sensor format, and even timecode. You'll also notice 3 quick function buttons on the top right behind the shutter button. On the left side, you have a 3.5mm mic input, full-size HDMI port, and USB-C port capable of data transfer and charging. So, GFX100 II. There's something prestigious in that title, and I kind of get it. Though the resolution here hasn't changed, there are so many updates to the image processing, autofocus, burst speeds, stabilization, EVF resolution, and the many, many video updates, including 8K video and internal ProRes recording. We really only scratched the surface here, and we didn't even talk about the numerous networking options that Fujifilm added here, such as built-in frame.io upload support. You can find an entire camera-to-cloud workflow in the menus that lets you upload proxy files, original ProRes recordings, JPEGs, or even high-res RAW images. You can even upload unattended while the camera is powered off and manage the account connection all within the camera. This could save filmmakers time on set, getting their files to editors across the world, or help photojournalists who need to send files right away for review. This new and improved GFX100 is truly impressive and offers both still and video abilities we once could only dream of. It's hard to believe that a 102 megapixel medium format capture and 8K video is available in a relatively small mirrorless body, much less with the advanced processing and connectivity that you get here. So, are you excited for the GFX100 II, and how could you use it on your next production? Let us know in the comments below. I'm Doug with B&H, and I'll see you next time.